Sure. I was, thanks for having me. This is, I guess I just sort of start very casually. I found it quite an interesting concept to come up with, explain my startup story. I spent a lot of time talking, I'm talking to people, and sometimes a lot of time talking at people. But I try not to talk about myself too much. I said this to my wife, and she laughed at me and said, "You're always talking about yourself." I said, "No, I'm always talking. I love a good discussion." I did, find it a little bit challenging to come up with or to think about what I wanted to say and come up with something. So I read through the bio that was on the Beauty's website and stuff, and I read it to my wife, and she said, "Wow, I'd like to meet that guy." And I thought, one of the things that I like to try and make sure that people take away from any time that I spend with them is some learning and is an understanding of how stories differ and where stories can go. So, if I can get this to work. This is my startup story versus truth. Maybe double click for everything. Quick disclaimer, everything is my views. I've worked for some companies, some public companies, and you might have heard of some of them. You may try and draw some conclusions about anything that I'm saying. Please don't. They are my opinions and my views only. Firstly, so we built REFFIND working from Stanton Library. It's absolutely true. It's part of our story.
Is that Stanton Library in North Sydney? In Sydney?
This is Stanton Library in North Sydney, not Stanton Library in the Orange County. So while the story is true, there's more to the story as well. REFFIND, we IPO'd at 20 cents. In 4 months, went to $1.96. This is part of the story, this is true. What's also true but not part of the story is 4 months later it was back down at 40 cents, and 4 months further again it was down to 10 cents. There's so much more to all of these startup stories that's true than what we say. One of the things that every startup's searching for is product market fit. And there's an expectation or a belief that going around that if you're selling your product, you have product market fit. And while there's some truth in that, there's what selling your product really means is that you've understood the problem. You can communicate the problem and you can communicate a solution to people. So selling the product equals product market fit, partly. But customer attrition means it's definitely not product market fit. So if you can sell your product, that's awesome. And there's some understanding. But if you're losing customers hand over fist, it means you haven't got product. Now, this is where we get to a point with startups where there's this concept of product market fit and whether it works, whether it doesn't, can you sell it, can it be profitable, are you going to make money, what's my idea worth? And we all know that the idea is worth it. Everyone says to everyone that you speak to in the startup ecosystem is that will tell you your idea is worth nothing, it's execution, it's being able to deliver on that idea. Maybe we need to back.
Maybe bring this closer to you.
Okay.
You can ROI if you like.
So the truth behind that part of the story is that the idea itself is worth nothing, but your passion of the problem and of the solution is what we're actually looking for. So as an investor, as a mentor, what I really want to see is I want to see passion for solving a problem. I want you to understand the problem and understand the solution. And it's something that we're not always very good at communicating. mistakes cause failure. We know that 90% of startups fail, and often quoted 90% in the first 12 months fail. And if you speak to founders, speak to experienced founders, they'll tell you that they make lots of mistakes. Now, the mistake itself isn't the cause of the failure. What causes failure, and what we're again not good at expressing in our stories, is that the failure is the inability to learn from that mistake and to change from it. Any of you who have started an entrepreneurial journey will have made some mistakes, or any small business journey made some mistakes, and success comes from learning from that. Now, the 5 P's of success. What is it? Show me that. Perfect planning.
Whatever it is.
Prior planning prevents poor performance. Again, so this is a story, and this is a story that that has some truth to it. You need to be able to plan, and you need to plan correctly to get stuff done. But the problem with innovation is, if you're making a real change to something, then you can't know where you're going. You can't plan that. And the confirmation bias that comes with that prior planning will almost invariably kill your business. So this is something that we've seen, that I've seen in a lot of startups, that we've experienced in startups of mine, where you have this idea, you think you have this product market fit, you're able to sell. The fact that you can sell reinforces that bias that your solution's correct, that you have that product market fit. The reality is you don't look deeply enough, you don't look at that, is there attrition? Are we really solving the problem? Are we solving it properly? That confirmation bias will kill the business. Execution is key. Now, this is the second part to the story before, which is your idea is worth nothing, and execution is key. Now, it's again absolutely true. It's part of the story, but the part of the story that we're not good at telling is that it's not just executing on what your vision was. It's not just executing on what you've planned out. It's continually learning and working to solve the problem in the best possible way. So a great example of this is Google. It's an example I've used with a lot of people. When Google launched, there were 30-something search engines in the world. Some of these were backed by public companies. Some of them were making money, some of them just weren't losing money. And Google was 2 guys who had this idea to build a better search engine that had no way of making money. And it's a horrible idea. Who'd invest in that? Google are now one of the biggest companies in the world, the biggest company in the world, one of the biggest companies in the world, because their focus was on solving the problem the best way possible, not providing a little dog to go along and shout out its suggestions when you're trying to search for something, but providing you the best way to find what you wanted to find. So there hasn't been a lot of my startup story, and it's because I think everyone's startup story is different. I know that everyone's startup story is different. I know that what we're not good at is really exposing the truth in the startup story. So what I like to do is I like to try and spend time with people and help them expose the truth in their own startup story and understand the truth of where their startup story is going to take them. And that's the end of my very, very brief presentation. If there's any questions, any thoughts?
I was just wondering, you were talking about REFFIND.
Yep.
Can you explain a little bit about what the company was and just that, how the idea came about, and so going back to those exciting times at North Sydney?
So REFFIND was initially, REFFIND was a website called NoRecruiters.com, I think is what we called it. And like a lot of businesses, we had, so at the time I was working for a digital agency in Sydney. And I joined this agency because they had a product that they were trying to take to market. This had nothing to do with their recruiters. So we built out this product and we won some awards for it and launched quite a successful beta and then ran out of money. So we went back to agency work, and one of the challenges there was always growing the team, hiring people. So no recruiters was our way of getting around the recruiter problem that we saw within our business, where we had some great hires, but the great hires that typically not come from recruiters. We had hires that had come from recruiters, and they had not uncommonly not worked out. And you know, our bias from within the business was that the best candidate for a recruiter, and apologies to any recruiters here, the best candidate for a recruiter was a candidate that lasted 3 months and 1 day. Because that was a candidate you could place into another job. And as a business, that's not what we wanted. So we had no recruiters. This is what we wanted to do. We built out this concept for matching. We decided that the best thing for us was to be able to match candidates and companies at a culture level. Skills to skills, but the culture match was what was important to us, particularly in agency life. If anyone's worked for a media agency, marketing agency, any sort of digital agency, you'll know that the culture is a massive part of the team and help make a team. So that was what we decided we were going to do. So we went to two of us went to a mutual acquaintance of ours. We said, this is what we want to do. We're going to turn this into something quite substantial. Here's our prototype. We're going to raise some money. We'd like you to invest. And he said, better than that, let's take this idea. We'll all go raise some money. We'll create a digital forward. So basically, it was an accelerator to turn ideas and democratise entrepreneurship was our goal. So by that we meant that there were people with plenty of ideas, plenty of experience, who didn't necessarily have the desire or the gumption to be entrepreneurs. So it was, you come to us, give us the idea, we will give you some equity in return from it, we will put the money in, we'll put the tech in, we'll build the team out, and there'll be a company that you won't have to be involved in if you're not the right person to be involved in it, or you have no desire to be involved in it. A company that you'll have some ownership of, that will be out there. So that was Digital Forge. REFFIND was the first company that we put through that process, and that was an internal idea of ours. So we spent time working, as I say, at North Sydney Library, and also at the pub just near it.
The rag.
There's the truth.
That shouldn't be a surprise though. And there was actually one afternoon at the pub, we were up in on the veranda outside of one of the sort of conference room things they've got there, or event rooms. And we were pushing through this idea of making this culture fit, of what parts were important in making culture fit. Like, can you ask questions like, are you a jeans or a suit person? Or, what can we learn from, are you a cat or a dog person? These sorts of things. And how much of culture fit can we determine from that being bags or cubicles? And we realised, all three of us, that the best hires that any of us have made were always referrals. It didn't matter how good the job ad was, it didn't matter how good the recruiter was, or how many candidates were there. The best hires were always that personal connection. And it occurred to us that we can make these algorithmic decisions, but ultimately there's a much better computer inside the brains of everyone who's connected to you. And in terms of making a recommendation for which engineer or which marketer or which HR person is the best person to join you, your friends, your family and your colleagues are the best people to do that. So that's what we built then. That's what REFFIND became. REFFIND became a way to supercharge that referral process. And initially it was small and medium businesses. Horrible idea. So what happened there was we created an app with 3 different users. We created an app for the employer. So you downloaded this app, you went in, you created this job. It was a really smart, clean, simple process. Then you sent that job onto your network. So then your network got this email or SMS, and they had to download the app. So they downloaded the app and they saw this job referral, or this job asking for a referral with a reward, a monetary reward attached to it. And then they forwarded it onto their network. And then their network had to download the app and say, yes, I'm interested. So 3 different users were trying to get on board to this app. And we spent all this time and money building out this thing that we thought was awesome. And we sent it out to our network because we were actually trying to hire people at the time. Sent it out to the network, and I think it was of the 100 people that we sent it out to, I think 10 downloaded it. Of those 10, I think it might have been 8 then referred people. It was quite a high number of people that referred it once we got over the line. And from the 8 who referred it, there was, I think, 2 people that downloaded it from the applicant and the candidate's perspective. So we realised at this point that our whole concept was largely flawed. We could go to businesses and sell the idea that referrals were awesome and that this app was the way to solve it, but ultimately it was such a challenge to get people on board that the whole idea fell over. Luckily at that time we had another person on board who, Brent Pearson. Brent's quite experienced in HR and HR tech. He's now running Handwater and doing really, really well. Many of you have seen that. If you run medium to large teams, Handwater is a great way to onboard your new employees. And Brent said to us, this just makes a problem. But it's still a massive space and a massive problem for enterprises. Now, enterprises have employee referral programs already. You don't need to worry about, they've also got employees, so you don't need to worry about the second step. In fact, you don't even need to get people on board for the first step because they've got jobs. So you don't need to get the employers on board because they've got jobs already in screen. You don't need to get the referrals on board in the same way because they've got employees, so getting out to that middle person who's really the distributor of the network. It's much simpler. And you certainly don't need your candidates on board because they've already got ATS, applicant tracking systems, and they've got job advertisements. So it became a very different solution to the same problem. And REFFIND then did really very well. We were able to go to companies, to sort of medium and large enterprises, sell this problem and this solution to them. They knew it was a problem, they knew there was a solution. Their referral programs just weren't particularly successful. And we were able to bolt this on, increase their referrals in some cases 10 or 12 times, and really make a difference to the level of hires that they were making. One of the challenges was applicant tracking systems are big, closed beasts by incumbents. So the biggest is Oracle, Taleo. And trying to integrate technically with Taleo was a real challenge. So one of the challenges we had was presenting back ROI to these businesses. We could go in and sell to the businesses and get new customers because we understood the problem, we understood the solution, we could communicate both of them. Presenting back the ROI to the business meant we didn't actually have product market fit. So we saw a high attrition rate. So that was one of the challenges that we had there. And this is where a lot of these learnings have come from. So, we made a number of mistakes, some of which I can't go into. It's still a public company, it's still a running company, and a lot of those are my opinion only. So it would be unfair of me to comment on any of those. But it was a tremendous journey. I mean, we did go through the IPO phase. And I say 10 cents only because it took a lot longer for it to get much worse again. I think to date, there was actually an announcement today, and I think today it's at 1.4 cents or 1.3 cents or something like that. Certainly none of the founders took anything out of that. We were all escrowed for way longer than it held value for. The IPO process was an exciting process, a costly process. It takes a long time, a lot of money to list a company on the stock exchange.
What led you to that, to decide to go to IPO?
Liquidity for investors.
So did you do that before it went to market, or?
The product.
Yeah, so did you launch?
We launched the product we launched the first version of the product in August or September of 2014. We launched the enterprise version of the product in February or March of 2015, and we listed in July of 2015. So the product had been live for 4 months.
So when you were pitching to investors, you were always, the IPO was one of the milestones?
It wasn't when we were pitched. So when we were pitching digital voice to investors, it was very much about quick turnarounds, quick returns on investment, and that the return, the exit strategy would be different for every company that grew out of digital voice. For some there'd be trade sales, for some there'd be IPOs. It would be dependent upon the time, dependent upon the company and what was happening. And one of the things that preceded REFFIND was OnePage. So OnePage listed on the ASX. OnePage was a HR tech startup out of America. They listed on the ASX in October of 2014. And if you look at our chart and OnePage's chart, they mirror each other. We're a few months later, but it's exactly the same shape. The company that came after us then was Search Party. So Search Party is another Australian HR tech startup based out of Sydney. Some of you guys will know Ben Hunt, who's the CEO of the Search Party. Ben and I share a lot of similarities, a lot of similar stories, a lot of similar contacts. And they saw the same thing. And one of the challenges for us, for all three, was when we listed, there was an understanding, and we were told by people who know way more than we know, that we'd have 12 to 18 months worth of this honeymoon period. 12 to 18 months where we could really get everything right, make it work, before we had to prove results to the market. And the result was that we didn't have anywhere near that long. And we weren't able to show results quickly enough. And by January of 2016, 6 months after listing, we were, you can go back through all of the information that's out there. Like the share price was down, the sentiment in the market was down, people's appetite for speculative stocks, particularly in HR tech in Australia, had been destroyed by these, so this was pre-Search Party, had been destroyed by the charts of REFFIND and OnePage. It's, it was a decision made for the wrong reasons, really, in my opinion.
Do you think if you timed your IPO differently, you would have different results?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think I believe that there were probably decisions made in the business because it was a listed company that it would have been made differently if it hadn't been a listed company. And ultimately, the listing itself shouldn't have impacted at all. The value of the share makes no difference to whether the company can succeed or not. There was a lot of confirmation bias. There wasn't a product market fit that there needed to be early on enough, and I don't think we learned quickly enough.
And do you think that part of the reason why you ended up IPOing was because the investors you ended up attracting were investors that wanted a quick turnaround?
Absolutely.
So if you had sort of looked for different investors potentially, not obviously that quick turnaround, that would you don't have that pressure? Do you think a lot of investors look to invest with the expectation that there would be an eventual IPO?
I think probably both in many regards. I mean, definitely there are past investors who are happy to sit in for a long haul. I think the challenge certainly back then was finding those investors in Australia, and so a lot of our investors came not from Australia as well. Finding those investors in Australia was a challenge back then. And yeah, we certainly sold on the promise that there was a quick turnaround, which didn't help. You go to the market and promise something, and then you change your mind or you can't deliver. That there'd be a good reason.
With the product to market fit, have you seen any examples where it's been a good product to market fit in the first instance at the conceptualization stage, but by the time it goes to market, it's not anymore? As in the lag time that happens?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, it's also through the life of the company. And you can have product market fit at launch and markets change underneath you, problems change underneath you. If you don't stay up with that, then it's the same as not having product market fit in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's product market fit is not it's not a state, it's not like Buddha achieving this state where once he's achieved enlightenment, once we've got product market fit, everything's good and we can sit there and meditate and the glow comes from everybody. Product market fit is absolutely understanding all the time what the problem is. Is your solution best? If it's not best, why not? What can be done? This is why tech companies employ thousands upon thousands of engineers once they have a stable product. I mean, if you look at Facebook, YouTube, Google, Amazon, Atlassian, all these companies have a tremendous amount of employees. It's because they're always trying to solve the problem,
So when you were sort of got investors from overseas, was that just using your existing network? Or
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it referral?
So it was basically personal networks.
Not through recruitment.
No, it was friends, family, contacts, business associates.
And at the stage of, or through, I guess at the stage of IPO, was it only a purely Australian focused market, or were you already? Did you already have customers that were overseas as well?
So when we IPO'd, we had 4 customers. I think it was might have been a few more timings.
4 customers.
So yeah,
Large? Very
Yeah.
large.
yeah, bigger. So I think our first, from memory, and I could be very wrong on these. From memory, our first 4 customers were Coles, A&P, Qantas. So the first few were all Australian, and so there was Coca-Cola and Lion Nathan. So they were all early customers. So they're all large enterprises. We within the first few months, we signed a partnership arrangement with Randstad. We had connections and agreements with Talbot 2, I think. So, and within a few months, we certainly signed up some US customers and had a team in the US trying to sell as well. So we had a team of 4 salespeople over there. The goal was always global. The focus was always global. But at IPO, we weren't at IPO. I think our customers were all domestic.
What are you doing now? Have you also set up another business and you're looking to venture capitalism yourself?
Yes. So now I spend a lot of time helping, advising, investing startups. Working on trying to change the VC model. So identified some problems in how I believe venture capital works for the Australian market in particular.
What are those?
So partly it's that by and large, Australian investors are still, there's a few problems, but partly that the existing Australian investors largely risk averse. And there's a growing trend where there's a class of Australian investors who aren't risk averse, but typically they come from ex-founders, people who have been entrepreneurial, have had startups, have made some money out of that. Now, up until recently, we haven't had a large group of those. And those who we have had, if we look at the Atlassian or if you look at, Mike Cannon Brooks and Scott Parker, they make so much money and they're still running their business. They can't invest that themselves in the startup. So that, they now have family offices that run that, run their investment portfolio. But there's still a lot of Australian investors, a lot of money out there where that is still too risk averse when you buy it. A lot of people would rather invest in bricks and mortar or mining or property or whatever they happen to invest in to make their money in the first instance. Now, I see a way to reduce the risk for them and to also provide them with a quicker option for liquidity without going down the public IPO route. So I'm quite happy to speak to anyone that wants to speak about XYZ and what we're trying to do and what the concept is and how we get there. But
Is your focus on the investor or the startup? Or are you marrying the two?
Both. So our focus, so I think we, as entrepreneurs and as investors, I think we generally understand the problems that startups have quite well. What we're not always great at understanding is the problem that exists in ecosystems. So one of the challenges, for instance, is for advisors and people who provide support services for startups. It's very hard to extract the value that you should be extracting from a startup if that has the money. So if you're providing support and advice to a startup, most of us do this for free. And we do it for free because we can, because we want to help. But it doesn't necessarily help the startup because that free transaction then generally doesn't contain with it any real relationship, or it doesn't come contained with any real relationship. So what will happen frequently is the advisor then gets a gig, has to go somewhere else, or they have a cash flow issue and they need to go and get some work, and they're not available for the startup. And we see a lot of businesses doing similar things, either providing discounted rates or more frequently taking equity stakes in businesses where they're being startups that are helping. Now, that equity stake can be advantageous in the future, but we know that 90% of them are going to fail. Do you really want to take an equity stake in a business? It means that then you have to believe in that business as well as providing your services. So I might be a web shop or a web design shop. I'm going to build a website. If I was going to take an equity stake in your business, I want to know that your business is going to succeed. So the question is, how can we provide value to the ecosystem and how can we grow value within the ecosystem without having to only back winners? Because the tremendous ideas and innovation doesn't just come from people who are going to win. It comes from the ecosystem as a whole. The benefit of Silicon Valley is everyone there is really pushing for the next biggest thing in the world to come from Silicon Valley. Once an ecosystem starts driving itself forward, that's tremendously powerful. So our focus is not just on investors, not just on startups, but on growing the value of the ecosystem.
Well, Andrew might stick around for a little bit after, if you wanted to ask some one-on-ones. But thank you so much, Andrew. That was really insightful.